Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Around the Big Ten podcast. I'm Marc Givler, joined by Chip Minnich, as always. A lot going on in the Big Ten as we get so close. Well, we have no Saturdays left until college football. This Saturday, there are some games, but the Big Ten will kick off play next week. Less than a week and a half, probably. I guess Thursday or Friday? I think it's
Thursday.
Thursday. So we're sitting here on Monday, and so we're 10 days from football being here, and week one obviously coming up soon. So a lot going on with that. Fall camps starting to take shape, position battles playing out. We had some big news around the conference. The NCAA gave the Michigan verdict, so we're going to start with that. We're not going to beat that dead horse that everyone's been talking about for the last week or so, few days or so, but we'll get into that a little bit. There's a big quarterback battle in the Big Ten that's been settled. We'll get into that, and then we'll dive into a couple of the Big Ten network stops that happened over the past week or so. So Chip, I don't want to give you PTSD. I want to make sure you're okay here, but your thoughts. Well, let's start your level of surprise by the punishment for Michigan from the NCAA.
I was definitely surprised. I'm not, I guess, out of the very different penalties that Michigan, I wasn't surprised about the financial aspect. I think that's just kind of the direction that the NCAA has decided to take going forward. So I would have thought a bowl ban for this coming season, but the fact that they are going to start going more towards a financial penalty, their rationale being we shouldn't penalize the players who weren't involved in it. I don't necessarily agree with it completely, but I understand it. That being said, the lack of vacated wins was a surprise, based on everything that came about. So it's, the NCAA is they essentially, I really like that Simpsons meme. We've done nothing and we're all out of ideas, man. It's like that kind of a thing that it just basically, it's like they're toothless. I just think that the NCAA, just kind of, when they came out and said that a bowl ban was warranted and punishment was warranted, but then they came around and basically said we're just going to make it financial, just made them look very, very bad, I think, across the board for most college football fans.
My 20-year-long stance of do not cooperate with the NCAA if you are under investigation, I believe, remains undefeated. There's no incentive to cooperate. There never has been, and that's not a recent thing. Schools that don't cooperate don't seem to get extra punishment. Schools that do cooperate don't seem to get lesser punishment. So never cooperate. That's the first rule. So Michigan followed that. I'm never surprised by what the NCAA does because everything's a surprise what they do. It's like one of those, like, you can't be surprised if you know it's going to be a surprise. But two things that were weird to me. The first thing was Sharon Moore seemingly getting like pick and choose his suspension was super odd. I'm not sure why that Oklahoma game is so sacred that he, there's nothing that could possibly happen that would allow him to not coach that game. I don't know that bumping it to next season's opener is silly. It should be all at once. Why drag this? Even if you're Michigan, why would you want this to be like a thing again? Like next, you got to talk about this next August again that he's suspended for the opener. Like this is like, I don't know how many years in a row the Big Ten media days, the Michigan coach is not going to be suspended for the season opener. Like, you have to keep talking about this. Like, I don't even know if you're Michigan if you want that. But the thing I thought was interesting was the words the NCAA used didn't seem to match up with the punishment. And so if the NCAA had come out and said, we don't think this is a very big deal, Didn't affect the outcome of games. We're not hammering them. We're giving them a relatively light punishment because we don't think this is a big deal. The evidence doesn't show that this is a big deal. I think a lot of people would have rolled their eyes at that, but there would have been consistency in terms of the messaging from the NCAA and the punishment. But what happened was they really admonished Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, really, like basically said they have absolutely no respect for the rules, no respect for NCAA guidelines, no respect for their own compliance department. And we also don't want to punish current players, which I've kind of been a fan of for years, actually, on that. But we don't want to punish current players. But you didn't punish the players who benefited from it by vacating any wins. I wasn't expecting a postseason. I certainly wasn't expecting them to vacate the title. They can't, really.
Right.
The CFP is not controlled by the NCAA. So in that sense, I wasn't even sure that, everyone was so sure a postseason ban was coming. Like, well, what does that look like? Because the CFP can still invite them. So that they would have to coordinate with the CFP on that. They don't really have the authority to like ban them from a bowl game. But if they go 10-2 and they're in the playoff, I don't think the NCAA actually has the authority to tell them they can't participate in the playoff as it's not an NCAA event. So that was always going to be kind of weird for me how they were going to kind of go through all that. So in that sense, I understood that part of it. But again, the Sharon Moore kind of picking and choosing the games he's suspended for, and really them admonishing Jim Harbaugh and admonishing Michigan for this. They didn't say this wasn't a big. They made it seem like they thought it was a really big deal, and that they didn't cooperate, and that they just don't care about compliance. And then, but we're just gonna kind of take some of your money. I don't know. I think it's very clear at this point. I said this at the beginning of the case. I said, here's the thing to kind of, for people who want them to get hammered, here's the thing to be careful of. The TV networks have slowly but surely over the last 30 years gained almost complete control over the sport. And they don't want Michigan to be decimated by scholarship losses. They don't want Michigan to be ineligible for the playoffs that they pay hundreds of millions of dollars to broadcast. They don't want a season where Michigan's games are essentially meaningless because they're banned from the postseason for those games they paid for to broadcast. So this is just kind of further evidence that this is all about money at this point, and that the TV networks are always going to go to bat for behind the scenes for the big brands, and they're not going to want these big brands to suffer things that could impact them directly on the field moving forward, and in turn impact their investment in the conference. So would Purdue have gotten away with this at this level? Northwestern, my guess is no. But my guess is, from what we've seen the last few years with the way these TV deals are now, that any top 10 program probably would have. And that's the landscape we're in right now. So any final thoughts on this? I said we wouldn't beat this horse to death.
Right. No, if anything, I have tremendous appreciation for the national writers who called out, like, hey, let's not ignore the fact that there was cheating. And what I mean by the national writers or people with a national platform, no disrespect to, for example, any of the Ohio State writers that have written or podcasted about this, or anyone else within the Big Ten. You have to admit, like back when everything happened with Ohio State, Sports Illustrated, man, they were quick to jump on Ohio State and, make it out, portray Jim Tressel in the most negative light. I highly doubt they're going to do that going forward. But Pat Forty of Sports Illustrated had an article condemning Michigan. Stuart Mandel of The Athletic, he said that Michigan should put the lyrics "hypocrisy" and "liars" in their fight song. Jim Rome on his program, said, "Hey, Michigan man, you cheated." I mean, he said that. So my point being is that the national perspective was not, like this was a nothing burger, that they recognized, like you said, Mark, okay, cheating did happen. And the fact that the NCAA was inconsistent with, laying out all the things about how they were non-compliant and, refusing to cooperate, and then that they did nothing, like the inconsistency, the national writers at least pointed out, hey, yeah, you have your national championship, but, you did cheat.
Yeah, if you're Ohio State or USC fans that have been over punished for transgressions that happened in the past by the NCAA, you're looking at this, you're furious, but it's a new era, man. Like it just, schools just aren't, people. I just like tell people to talk about the death penalty. I'm like, we will. I think I even said on this podcast, we will never see the death penalty again in college athletics. Not going to happen. But yeah, it just, the punishments have changed. The crimes have, changed. Selling your trinkets for tattoos is no longer going to be banned by the NCAA, let alone getting a Hall of Fame coach fired. So like things have evolved, and it's really stinks for the schools that got hammered 10, 15 years ago. But moving forward, that's just kind of how things are going to be, I guess. So lesson learned on that for anyone hoping their rival is going to get smashed by the NCAA over something, because it doesn't seem like that's going to be in the cards for anyone moving forward. All right, moving on to the rivals of the Michigan Wolverines, Ohio State. They were in the news here on Monday. Ryan Day has named the Buckeyes starting quarterback for the 2025 season. It is Julian Sayin, the second-year player, former five-star recruit. Not a surprise to those of us who are keeping our eyes and ears around the program. Sayin was the favorite this offseason. Veteran Lincoln Kienholz pushed a little bit, but Ryan Day, ready to name the starter on Monday, goes with Julian Sayin. Chip, probably, I'm sure you expected this, but just now that it's happened, your thoughts. Do you think this is the right decision? Are you intrigued by this decision? Are you not intrigued by this decision? What happens if Julian Sayin goes 4 for 13 for a pick against Texas in the first half? Let's break this down, what all this means for Ohio State.
Well, I'm not necessarily intrigued, and I'm certainly not surprised. Sayin was the favorite going into it. I definitely, to add to not surprised that Lincoln Kienholz made this. This was more of a battle than I think people realized, and I know that we're going to talk about programs within that the Big Ten Network has visited. Even the people that don't see Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kienholz on a frequent basis acknowledge, hey, this is a legitimate battle. I think if you're Julian Sayin, the good thing is that you've got this week and next to fully get immersed into the game plan. If you're Ryan Day, what you have to be kind of doing behind the scenes for both players is telling Julian Sayin, and let's just, using your stat line there, saying, okay, you need to, go out and just play the way that you're capable of. Don't try to win this game on your own, because as you and I know, and our listeners and viewers know, Ohio State has a tremendous offensive arsenal at his disposal to take advantage of that. Play within the offense and don't try to win the game on your own. Don't press, because that's where mistakes usually happen. And then by the same token, if Ryan Day to Lincoln Kienholz, hey, need you to stay in this focused. It's only one play away from you taking over the keys to the car, so to speak. You're still a vital piece of this offense, not just as the backup, but more than likely being called upon in crucial situations. It wouldn't surprise me. I think Ryan Day even alluded to the fact that they might have some special packages for Lincoln Kienholz, because one of the things that I think that just kind of gets that, not to imply that Julian Sayin isn't a good athlete, but like Lincoln Kienholz athletically is probably a better athlete overall in terms of, just, I think he's bigger, probably faster. So, like any kind of, potentially like maybe like short yardage or goal line or something like that, where you can really keep an opposing defense off balance, Lincoln Kienholz might be substituted in. But getting back to it, I think this is going to be something that is probably in the best interest of the Ohio State offense to have named a starter to kind of because it was always going to be the question on every beat writer's, first opportunity to ask of the coaching staff, where are we? It's been settled. So now you can focus on getting ready for Texas.
Yeah. And if I'm Ryan Day, I'm making sure Lincoln Kienholz is keeping sharp on his taking snaps from under center for quarterback sneaks. He's just a much bigger, stronger kid than Julian Sayin is. But Sayin's just a tremendous pure thrower. He can really sling. He's got a great arm. He's got an accurate arm. Throws a good deep ball. A lot to like there. And this is Ryan Day's MO. Right around now is when he announces his starting quarterbacks when there's a competition. And it makes sense because, as has been laid out before, the first 2 to 3 weeks of camp, you're not just like running out the ones there for 80% of snaps. The first 2 to 3 weeks of camp are developmental in nature. The first 2 to 3 weeks, everyone's getting reps. Everyone's, you're trying to get as many bodies reps as possible. You're not trying to burn out your starters the first week of camp. So you're able to kind of have these 2 or 3 weeks to let things play out. And then when you get to like 2 weeks out, it's time to name a starter so you can get your ones. It's time to name your starters really at most positions. You can get your ones together, get your 11 together on both sides of the ball, and start putting in game plans and everything else. So this is the appropriate time to do it. I think it's easier to go to Kienholz if Sayin struggles, because Kienholz, not that either one of them are like dripping with experience, but Kienholz has been in the program longer. He's been in more live action. I do think, again, it's easier to go to the older guy if there's a struggle that you need to sit Sayin down, whether it's for a series or just for a game, even if the Texas game doesn't go well. But I think that's the easier move to make than to go with Kienholz and then throw in the young guy if the more experienced guy doesn't work. So I think that's always a harder thing to do. But we'll see how it goes. I think the quarterback situations at Michigan and Ohio State are going to be fascinating this year because both guys are so highly touted. I've actually been hearing I know people are going to laugh at this because I know Ohio State fans have been making fun of certain aspects going on up there, but I've heard Bryce Underwood looks tremendous in fall camp so far. In this offseason has been really good. I think he has to do more than Julian Sayin has to do, which is going to make things really interesting because when you do have to do more, it puts a lot more pressure on you. And when you have to be a bigger part of things, as a young player, how quickly is he going to be able to shoulder that type of load versus Julian Sayin, where it's like, dude, just don't crash the Ferrari. Like, you've got multiple first-round picks at wide receiver. You've got maybe the best tight end Ohio State's had in forever. You've got a good, experienced offensive line. Just don't mess this up for us. If you're Michigan, it's like, no, we need you to not just mess this up for us. We need you to help to be a big part of this for us if we're going to go to where we want to go. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic throughout the year with those two very highly thought of young quarterbacks. As you mentioned, Chip, Big Ten Network continued to go around various campuses. We're going to talk about two of those visits today. And two programs I think are in very different worlds right now. Mm-hmm. We will start with Wisconsin. I will use my disclaimer that you guys have heard a million times. I like Luke Fickell personally. I want him to succeed. I think he's a good football coach. I think given the business he is in, he's one of the most sincere and honest human beings that you'll find in a business with a lot of BS. But it doesn't look good right now, does it?
No. And the reason I'm kind of suppressing a laugh is we've talked about how the Big Ten Network, that they try to put a positive spin on every time that they visited. So I think this is as polite as they could possibly be about what Wisconsin's offense looked like the last few years. And I wrote it down. And in the words of the Big Ten Network, Wisconsin lacked an identity on offense. I think that is as polite as they can possibly be when talking about Wisconsin. So that being said, they really emphasize the fact that Wisconsin, they need to get back to running the ball. A modernized version of running the ball is the way that they refer to that, meaning that no disrespect to running out the I formation, but being able to effectively run the ball. The new offensive coordinator, Jeff Grimes, they're really relying on him to modernize the offense, but get back to what made Wisconsin such a physical presence within the Big Ten. Being able to blow people off the line of scrimmage and control the clock and run the ball. They're really excited about Billy Edwards Jr. That was another thing they emphasized, is that with Billy Edwards Jr. at quarterback, say what you will, not that he's in the same kind of category about like in terms of the physical traits that of the quarterbacks that we've been discussing at Ohio State or Michigan, but Billy Edwards Jr. being, a kind of a veteran presence, that, somebody who can get Wisconsin in, the right formation and do the right thing. And again, not crash the car, all those kind of things. And on the defensive side of the ball, this was something that I thought was interesting, is that along the defensive line, recognizing the fact that the game is won or lost within the trenches on the defensive line, the fact that now Wisconsin has up to 9 defensive linemen who are greater than or equal to 300 pounds. The fact that they need to be able to stop the run and be able to, be more of a traditional Wisconsin defense that we haven't seen the last few years. Even though Luke Fickell, that's kind of where, he cut his teeth as an assistant coach on his rise up through the ranks, the fact that they need to get back to playing better on defense. So it was well acknowledged that Wisconsin, they are playing against, within their schedule, they're playing 4 teams that won 10 or more games last season. So, I mean, their schedule, even if everything was well established, would be a challenge. But the idea that Wisconsin is going to get back to what made them a formidable team, I don't know if it's going to reflect on the record side. I think it's going to be kind of hit or miss in terms of, can they get to that magic 6 number? And that's just my personal opinion. But the idea that, all right, they are getting back to what made them a feared team within the Big Ten, getting back to more of a physical style of play. So that's kind of encouraging if you're a Wisconsin Badger fan.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. First of all, I really do like the Jeff Grimes hire, and I wish that combination of him and Fickell could have come together at the start of Fickell's Wisconsin tenure. I think we'd be talking about Wisconsin a little bit differently right now than we are. But it didn't happen that way, and so here we are. But I look at them and I wonder, in the administration's mind, what would constitute success to the point of, like, we're not considering a change at the head coaching position. And because I don't think the schedule is going to allow them to go any better than 6 or 7 wins. In fact, I think the schedule is probably setting them up to win like 5 games at best.
Right.
If you ask me, but now maybe I'm dead wrong on that. But I think they have a brutal schedule that does them no favors, and they don't have the horses to sustain that 12-game gauntlet. But if they go 5-7, but they're like super competitive, is he safe? Because 5-7 at Wisconsin's a travesty, but yet, given what you knew going into the season with the schedule and what you had talent-wise and a new coordinator now and everything else, if you're 5-7, but you play like 4 or 5 of those big-time teams really tough, you don't lay down, you get back to playing physical football, is that enough to buy him another year? Because if they go 4-8 and they lay down in 5 or 6 of those losses, I don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking earlier about how the Big Ten, some of those teams start early. Wisconsin is one of those teams, and they start on a Thursday night. It's a Big Ten network season opener against Miami of Ohio. And I've said this on this show previously, is like, that's not a gimme. That is definitely, now Wisconsin is heavily favored. I know that you're more on the gambling line side than me, but I think, Wisconsin is a heavy favorite. If you're Wisconsin, I'm not suggesting that they do this to try to humiliate Miami of Ohio, but if you're Wisconsin, you need to come out and make a statement, because I think psychologically it's like, okay, we can do this. This is who we are, and this is who we used to be, and this is what we can be, and go out and be dominant against Miami of Ohio can help you potentially have a springboard effect. That's just me. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic for Luke Fickell. But I just think that if you come out and you are dominant on both sides of the ball against Miami of Ohio, now granted, that you can't really reach back into your bag of tricks like a few weeks later when you're down in Tuscaloosa playing against Alabama and think that that's going to be, it's going to be just as successful. But I'm just saying that getting off on the right foot against a really good team within the MAC, I think would really help them psychologically.
Yeah, they can't have a quick hook with like the starters, unfortunately. I mean, there's school, Oregon and Penn State, and those programs can do that this year, and Ohio State can do that this year, but Illinois can probably do that this year. But Wisconsin needs to reestablish their identity. They need to reestablish their confidence, and I agree. I think you got to, unfortunately, if you're an inferior opponent this year on Wisconsin's early schedule, unfortunately, you're going to have to be ready to go, because I think they do need to keep their foot on the gas and continue to build cohesiveness with that group with some new faces at key positions. So that will be interesting. I was surprised at the line. I think it's up to like 17.5 now.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I'm going to ponder that one over the next week or so, but I was thinking closer to like 8 to 10. Now, I guess Miami of Ohio did sustain some pretty significant losses, graduation portal, etc. So I think there's a lot of teams in the MAC this year that I don't think people are quite sure of, because there's not that they can't be as good as they were last year, but just like there's a lot out and then a lot in, and it's like, okay, how did this, did they gain more than they lost, and trying to figure that out. I think OU is kind of in a similar boat where people are like, how good is OU going to be? Some people think they're going to be a championship contender in the league again. Others think they're going to be taking a step or two back. I think Miami and Ohio is kind of the same situation, and Toledo is kind of one of the schools that is kind of surging as far as the MAC goes and people's opinions there. But that'll be an interesting opening test for Wisconsin, kind of see how they look right out of the gate. They're going to have to get that together quickly with the schedule they have. And like I said, I hope it works out for Fickell. I really do. Other end of the spectrum is Illinois, which is like sky high expectations, probably thrilled with their coaching staff right now, to the point of, they're getting this, they get the high preseason rankings now too. They were a little higher than I thought they might be. So they're getting a lot of national respect. And is it too much? Is it too much? Because now the target's on their back.
The reason I'm smiling is because we've talked about this, and it makes me feel good, Mark, that like when we talk about these things, that maybe, somebody at the Big Ten Network is actually listening to us, because guess what? The theme at Illinois, I mentioned a moment ago about how Wisconsin is like, okay, they lacked an identity. Wisconsin, the theme, managing expectations, because it was all about the fact that, all right, this is a team, and I thought this was very impressive. This is a team, like you said, they are highly ranked. The fact that they have their entire offensive line coming back. So that is, you want to talk about something that is, I don't want to say unheard of, but it's unusual in today's day and age of, with the transfer portal, so having a veteran offensive line, Luke Altmaier back, the fact that they feel very confident in what he can do, again, he knows what he can do and can't do within the confines of that offense. You talked about the idea like Aaron Henry as a defensive coordinator. This is his third year, and he's kind of grown into the role. And the fact that Brett Bielema, gained his reputation as a defensive coach. So the defense, has improved. This is something that I thought was kind of interesting, and is that they pointed out that last year, 5 times Illinois was down in the fourth quarter and came back to win games. So this is a team that is used to adversity, is used to, not that they know that they have it in the bag. And let's face it, that win, one of those wins against Rutgers, you couldn't, script like more of a surprise miracle finish. But they circled, and I know I keep going back to the fact that, man, I can't wait for that game against Indiana on September 20th. But the game that the Big Ten Network pointed out as like, all right, keep an eye on this one. So it's kind of worth noting if you're an Illinois fan. is the game versus Duke on September 6th, because Duke, another solid program. This is a good non-conference test. So that's kind of like the theme, is that managing expectations. Like, hey, they've got a tough schedule, but it's not impossible. I mean, it doesn't even compare. I mean, it's like night and day compared to what Wisconsin's going to be going through. So the fact that Illinois, like they're going to be welcoming in Ohio State. They mentioned on the Big Ten Network, hey, if Illinois is undefeated when Ohio State comes to town, the fans are going to be thinking this is a college football playoff team. So again, managing expectations is the theme. I wonder where they heard that. I don't know. I'm not saying that they stole it from us, but to me, that's kind of, that's basically what the theme of the Big Ten Network's visit to Illinois was all about.
That is a good point about the Duke game, because they're quietly expected to win 7 or 8 games this year.
Yeah.
So it's not like your older brother's Duke,
right.
3-9, 2-10 basketball school. Like they've become a fairly competitive football program. And there's actually, I was watching some ACC stuff over the last few weeks, and Duke's like a surprising pick, not to win the conference or anything like that, but Duke's like a surprising, like everyone seems to like just chalk them up for 7 or 8 wins. I'm like, okay. So they've done a good job in the transfer portal. I know they got a pretty good quarterback they like. I can't even remember his name now, but I know they got a quarterback out of the portal that everyone's kind of talking about right now as a dual threat kid. But so there's some interesting dynamics there. So yeah, you're right. If they fall flat on their face to Duke coming out of the gates, that's trouble.
Yes.
Now, because they are not. We talk about margin for error. Like the margin for error that the Texas Ohio State loser is going to have is like as wide as the Mississippi River. They're going to get a total pass on that. Whoever loses that game is going to get a total pass. I would argue the Michigan Oklahoma loser is going to get a decent sized pass on that one too. But you lose to Duke, I don't think you have the schedule after that to get a pass. I think 10-2 puts them probably in, but certainly on the bubble. Like we don't think of Ohio State or Michigan or Oregon or Penn State that way. If those programs go 10-2, they are in. If Illinois goes 10-2, I think they'd be in, but they could get Miami'd. If you lose to Duke and Ohio State blows you out in Memorial Stadium, you could get Miami. They could sit there and be like, well, where are the big wins? And you lost to Duke and Ohio State crushed you, and so that is a key for them. They can't flop on that one, because the perception is going to be, Illinois overrated. Why did we fall for it? And that's going to be the perception. So I'm very high on Illinois, though. We've talked about that a lot. I think they got all the right pieces. I think they'll be really good on defense again. I think Luke Altmaier, there's a lot of unknowns at quarterback in the Big Ten. So like, it's hard to like rank them, which by the way, I think we should do a Big Ten quarterback draft next week. But,
okay.
Just draft them 1-18 and then see who gets the best 9 at the end of the year. But I think coming into the season, Luke Altmaier is probably the second most sure thing at quarterback in the Big Ten behind Aller. I mean, could one of the young kids at Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan end up being better? Yeah, sure. And probably will be better long term. But for September of 2025, Luke Altmaier's a top 2 or 3 quarterback in the Big Ten. So all the pieces are there for this to happen. And you just got it. It's like you can't make the playoff in September unless you're Ohio State or Texas, in my opinion, because I think the winner of that game is just about it. You can't make the playoff in September, but you can play yourself right out of it. So they got to be careful. Go ahead.
The point about Texas and Ohio State that I think is, to me, is fascinating, because I completely agree with you, is that Texas and Ohio State, no matter what, like unless it turns out to be like a unforeseen blowout, which I mean, that would be a shocker. I mean, that being said, I think the advantage for both teams, Texas and Ohio State, is not only about the playoff. I think when you open up with like such a colossal game, is that the aftermath is that both coaching staffs are going to have a really good idea as to what they have within their team and what they need to work on. And I realize this is going to sound like, condescending about all these other teams within the Big Ten that aren't, opening up, in a top top game is, okay, you could beat the snot out of, fill in the blank and not really know what you have until, like, for example, I'm just going to throw this out there. Penn State having 3 very easy games, then a bye, and then Oregon comes to town, who incidentally, Oregon, now granted, like, they got some easy winnable games, but they play Oklahoma State. They play Oregon State in a rivalry game. They go on the road to Northwestern. My point being, if you're Penn State, you're going to be welcoming in Oregon and you're going to be the favorite, but are you really sure what you've got? That's just me.
Yeah. No, it's good because for both teams, it's going to, to your point, it's going to show them some areas to work on. For even the team that loses,
right,
that's like a chip on your shoulder the rest of the season.
Oh yeah,
because everyone's going to, how the national media is, how Twitter and fans are, is whoever loses that game, overrated, and
right,
Sark can't win the big one, or Ryan Day, still soft, whatever people are going to say, and it's going to put a chip on someone's shoulder, but it's going to show both teams, some real glaring weaknesses will be exploited in that game if they have them. So, yep, that'll be a big one. We'll preview that one very, very in depth. We'll go way in depth on a lot of these big early season matchups as we get closer to the season. But I do think we should do the quarterback draft next week.
Okay, I'm up for it.
And then just see who gets the best 9 quarterbacks. Look at stats at the end of the year or something. And be like, who had the best 9 quarterbacks of the thing? Because I think it's fascinating because, again, you got Drew Aller coming back, you got Luke Altmaier coming back, but then it's like, okay, like Dante Moore,
right?
And Bryce Underwood. Like, where would you draft those guys? Would you draft them 1 or 2? Would you be afraid to do that and kind of take a couple of veterans up at front? Like, I think there's a lot of unknowns. You got some transfers in. You got guys who went from one Big Ten school to another. There are all sorts of interesting. I have no idea what to make of the Big Ten quarterback hierarchy right now.
Very good point.
I think it could look very different first week of October than it would maybe right now, based on how some of these young guys come out of the gates. But so we will. We'll think about doing that next week, or maybe later this week or whatever. Next week, obviously, we'll be pretty locked in on the week 1 matchups in the conference. I know Nebraska, Cincinnati, I think is going to be a big one. Obviously, Ohio State, Texas is going to be a big one, but there'll be some other ones to talk about as well. So we'll be here for all that. We'll wrap up at some point. We'll also wrap up a couple of the schools. The Big Ten Network stopped by. We still have a few of those to go over. But thanks, everyone, again. Any parting thoughts here, Chip? Or are we?
Hey, week 0. We're in it.
I know. It's just a few days away.
I mean, what says, what truly says, like, oh, a trip to Ireland. I've got to see Iowa State and Kansas State. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, to each their own.
Look, I'm looking forward to the games. Like
I am.
Good. But like, yeah, that was a weird, like, those two are playing in Ireland, like not Notre Dame or like,
exactly.
You're not going to send like Alabama out there or Georgia or Michigan, Ohio State, whatever. But I'm not complaining. It's 2 teams that have a chance to win their conference. 2 pretty good programs, 2 good coaches. I'm looking forward to it. Gosh, I would even, I won't be able to watch Kansas Fresno State, but if I was home for Kansas Fresno State would be on the television. I'm that sick, but I'll actually be in Florida doing some recruiting coverage down. There's a huge high school football showcase in Florida here this weekend, so that's where I'll be for most of the weekend. But so it's here, folks. It's just a few days away. So appreciate everyone watching and listening, and we'll be back here in a few days with another episode.